Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. So the Valorous RTA season has come to a close. I wanted to do an account review now that it's over, so we could go over my thoughts on the season and how all the different units are built. You can see we are in the next season preparation in progress. This season was really frustrating for me to play for a couple reasons. One, I'm playing on this new account now, and this account is built very differently than the way my previous account was built. The items on this account are very fast, but the bruisers are not really of the same quality. And so my playstyle in the past was always to, play aggressively, but then flex very quickly to a very defensive kind of bruiser-oriented strategy if people tried to contest me. And it's hard to do that on this account because I don't really have the gear score to back it up. So I feel like I need to kind of play more aggressive than I'm used to playing. I can go through the builds here and we can take a look. So here's Ran. Obviously, he's built very quickly, right? That's kind of the point of Ran. You need him, I think, around 315 at the legend level. You can probably get away with 310. A lot of people just kind of bluff their speed and it's probably fine. Artifact for him is, I think RNL is probably one of the better ones once you get a decent amount of damage on him so that you can one-shot squishies. If you don't have the damage, then you can use, the Green Wildred artifact to increase his damage. Here's Lua. So this was kind of the cornerstone of the draft strategy for me this season. I was pre-banning Zio and Landy at the end, and then just trying to first pick this unit and abuse the fact that I gear gap people with speed on this account. She's really absurdly powerful and still a really good unit despite the fact that a couple of units have come out recently which I think kind of impact her a little bit. Summer Luluka, for example, can kind of bring her out of stealth and that makes her not as great. Also, Candy has come out and that also breaks her out of stealth. So I pre-ban Candy so you can still use Lua, but if you don't do that and Candy's still in the pool of units you can play, then Lula is, I think, more manageable because of that. I have her on Song of Stars to combo with another hero. So this artifact allows you to put target on something after a single attack. So you can skill 2 and put a target on someone, and then you can skill 1 and put a target on a second hero, and then you can use Architect Leica right here, Soulburn her thing and put a target on a third thing, and then use the skill 3 on Leica, and that will basically blow their entire team up. It's pretty funny. And it's something that you can't really do unless you have a super fast Lua, so it's a super cash strategy. Whoops, I don't know why I selected the Rangers there. So that was the thought process with Lua, but it's pretty funny when you can pull that off. That draft is kind of hard to get though, because if people contest you for speed during the draft, you can't really pick Leica at the end because she's like 260, 270. So if they're fighting above that, then it may not be an option. But against slower players, it's really good. Here's Pera, again, just another really fast unit. This unit, I think, if you lack speed gear, she's probably one of the better units you could put what speed gear you have on, just because her base speed is so high. She's great with her own artifact. I see people run RNL on her. I think RNL is actually kind of a scam. I really don't like that on Pera. You'll get those RNG turns where she'll RNL a bunch and stun a bunch of things in turn 1 and just steal a game. That obviously can happen. But then you'll also have games where she'll RNL out of her own stealth buff and then just die. So I think that's kind of dumb. But yeah, you pick this unit into things like Briar Witch Iceria, Conquer Lilius, stuff like that, because of her buff block here. Whoops, on her skill 2. Makes her a really strong unit. Command Model Leica didn't really pick this unit much at all. She is built quickly enough to be a speed contest. I was picking her more when I was not pre-banning Zio, because if they would pre-ban or if they use Zio early in the draft, you could draft Guiding Light units that were fast to kind of cut in between him and the rest of their team if they didn't have a bridge. So Command Model Leica was good for those scenarios, which admittedly did not happen very often. Here's Ahmed. Here's another hero that is basically a big cash unit. You have to have her very fast to be able to use her. I think this is about as slow as you can reasonably have her to use her effectively. The key with this unit is you combine her with units like Steny and Destina and Green Sid, kind of like in that video I showed before. and you can really blow people up with this. I think I had her built more quickly for that video. She was around 307, but 300 to 305 is like the bare minimum speed. The idea is you want to be able to use her to outspeed the openers with a single imprint. So, you know, you take Green Sid and he gives plus 10 speed to Ahmed. So you want her at like 315 with the speed buff. That way you're outspeeding, you know, many people's openers, which are 310 right around you. Wanderer Silk. This is a unit that I only really pick when you're speed contesting. She does her job really well. You know, she has a great speed imprint, and you can use her dual attack on the skill 2 to be able to, you know, snipe a unit right away, or you can push somebody way back to the end of the line. Guiding Light is a really nice artifact for her because it gives her a buff at the beginning of the turn, so you can use kind of like any set of gear on her, and you can still fire this skill 2 off on her first turn. Because this, you know, you need a buff on her to trigger the dual attack. So an alternative thing you could do is you can put her on immunity set, and then you can run her on Sachet, which I also like a lot, but you have to have really fast immunity gear for that. So I was just trying to get her quickly here, so you can see the Guiding Light decision for that reason. Here's one of the SIDs that I have. You kind of want 2 SIDs built, I think. It's nice to have one at 300 speed, so that you can use him to speed contest when you're doing these speed imprint drafts. It's really nice having the fast Sid for that. Wind Rider is, you know, the best in slot for him, and you're going to want both of them on the one that gives advantageous element to your skill 3. You know, and he's kind of built like an Ace Sid basically, but you know, he gives speed imprint to his team. So he's a nice little pocket pick to have when you're speed racing. I've changed Conquer Lilies quite a bit. In the beginning of the season, I was running her at 310, and honestly, speed doesn't really matter on Conquer anymore. I think that, you know, the fact that Zeo is out there just makes it so that it doesn't matter if your Conquer is 300 or 310 or 315 in many cases, since if they are going to contest you, they're going to do it with Zeo. Now I've been pre-banning Zeo, and even with that pre-ban, the speed doesn't really matter, because the people that'll try to outspeed you, they'll be picking Peyra. And frankly, unless you have like a 320 Conquer Lilius, like in the legend level, Peyra is going to just outspeed you anyways. So you need the speed to outspeed, you know, things like Zahhak and all of those kind of 280-ish, you know, 290 units. And once you have that, I think, you know, you're fine. Putting her on immunity is important. A lot of people are running her on Proof of Valor. I think that's a good choice. It really makes her last a lot longer. My Proof of Valor is on APOC, and I just haven't taken it off. So yeah, that's Conqueror. She's pretty self-explanatory. I like Circus Fantasia just to give a little bit more effectiveness. Flan, didn't really pick very often. She's like a super niche 5th pick for the way I play. You know, some cleavers build their whole strategy around Flan. That's kind of fallen off a bit. But it's nice to have a fast Flan that you can pick at the end, just in case they leave themselves open. You know, if you have that opportunity to just boost up, you know, a damage like a Steny or something and just deal a ton of damage, Flan can be nice for that reason. Okay, Faithless Lidica. This was another kind of like Guiding Light unit that I could pick if they pick Zeo, and you could do kind of like that trap, you know, where you pick General Purgus and Faithless Lidica and Steny and stuff. That trap kind of fell off a few days after the Zeo drafts got popular towards the end of the season, since people figured out how to counter it. So it was hard to Zeo trap the better players. They could use things like Aiden and Summertime Iceria. And the way that would prevent the trap is, you know, you would generally pick a bunch of stealth units and then General Purgus right here. And his whole thing is, you know, when he gets hit, it CR boosts your whole team. So he would be one unit that you would give them the option to hit, and then the other one would typically be either Holiday Euphine or Fat Cat. Holiday Euphine, you know, if she's not crit, you know, if she evades, then she'll get a boost up here with Snow Crystal. So after the caster suffers a non-critical hit, it'll boost her up. So Zeo basically can't crit with his skill 3, so he does that, and then, you know, you also have the evasion to prevent being crit as well, and that'll boost her up and cut the team. But if they have Aiden, you know, Holiday Euphine has to AoE, so she has to hit Aiden, and then Aiden will counterattack most of the time, and that counterattack will proc Summertime Iceria, which will boost their team, and that will boost their team above your team, and so your Holiday Euphine doesn't cut because they ban General Purgus out. So that trap only works against certain types of Zeo drafts, and the better players learned how to adapt to it. Here's the Hawk. Whoops. He was a good pick into Aiden, pretty much. The other scenarios where you could pick Zahhak would be if they use Para against you in some scenarios, since his S2 can cleanse and then boost up. So you basically cut in between Para and the rest of their team and cleanse away that unbuffable. It could be helpful. So beyond that, you just want damage, so that he has enough damage to, one-shot an Aiden, and then enough speed, to go before units, that could interrupt you somehow. As far as his artifact goes, some people run him on Symbol. I think my Symbol's on last piece, Karen. So instead I use this artifact, the sort of Autumn Eclipse. I believe this is, what's her name's artifact? Arunka's. I only use it because it gives hit chance. So I just wanted an artifact to lower the chance that Aiden would dodge. It also increases the attack of everyone, which is, I guess like a nice bonus. But I was mostly just looking for the hit chance. Okay, Fairy Tail Tenebria, kind of a niche, like 5th pick. You just want her to have a lot of effectiveness and then enough speed to outspeed, units like Hand Guy, or I guess not Hand Guy because he would just cleanse, but, all of their kind of middle spear tier units that could cleanse, so like Destina, stuff like that. I guess that's also a bad example because she's green and F10 he might not land on her. Lots of, like Braceria, I guess would be a good example, or, any unit like Arrowell that's going to move in between, the rest of your team. And then you just want enough effectiveness to be able to debuff them. She's an extremely threatening unit when you get her through the draft because she offers a ton of control. So she's usually a must ban at the end. Closer Charles, I think I picked him literally once, and it was pretty funny until like Last Rider Crow, and then I also had Opsig, which is kind of a classic combo. He's just really hard to use since he doesn't, he can still trigger counterattacks on this, right? Like they haven't buffed that away like they did with Strays. Yeah, he can still get countered, so it's like the very rare draft. It's usually they've picked LRK, and then they've picked a bunch of slow units that don't interact with you, and then you can do it. That just doesn't happen very often, but he's a super, super fun unit. I really like Closer Charles, even though his skill 3 animation is pretty garbage. I didn't draft Ning Ning at all. She's just holding like filler gear or something. Should play around more with Ning Ning drafts just because I think they could be kind of fun, like with a barrier inversion. Here's last piece, Karen. I've changed her build a lot over the season. I had her on like a super premium DPS set for a while because I thought it was funny. You could, basically use her to one-shot a lot of like really tanky Aidens behind Arrowell and take a lot of players off guard, since a lot of players, I think, assume their Aiden is going to be able to tank it because most people weren't running so high damage on her. They were trying to get her faster. Okay, Solitaria is one of the worst units in Epic 7. She is just super toxic, and I'm glad that she kind of fell off. She was very popular in the middle of the season, and that was awful. But, she is what she is. She has the ability to deny focus, so you draft her into units like Remnant Violet or SSV, and, she's good at her job. She enables a lot of other, debuff comps like DDR and stuff like that. You want her around this speed with, bulk and enough effectiveness to do her job. And yeah, against the right draft, she was a must ban just because she's kind of like, the new Dizzy. She just does so many debuffs, like it overwhelms the opponent. Spirit Eye Celine didn't really draft at all. Yeah, she can, I guess, be okay against certain cleave teams, but it's a pretty niche pick. You want her fast. I think having her on this little Secret Art Swordstorm is nice to pants grab. And yeah, I wouldn't really pick her very often. She's pretty hard to use. Holiday Euphine was kind of good there for like a day or two when the Zeo traps were working really well. And then the Zeo cleavers kind of learned to adapt to her, and so she fell off. The intent of her build here is you need her fast enough to cut their follow-up to Zeo. So, if they had something like Ran or whatever, you would need her to be able to boost above that, because the fact that, if they missed on her, they wouldn't get a debuff on her, so they wouldn't be boosting a unit like Jacko up. And you need her on immunity in case they have Moonlight Rowana, since Rowana is going to CR boost way past Euphine, even if they do miss on her. So you need that immunity so she doesn't get reset, and that was kind of her purpose. Once you get her to that speed, which is the 270 mark, then you just want a little bit of damage and some bulk, and that's kind of Holiday Euphine in a nutshell. Here's Summertime Iceria. You know, this is a pretty standard, you know, you want her about 270 speed with a bunch of attack and effectiveness. I don't think this unit is really changed in her build too much. Almost never picked her. She's a very rare, like, pick towards the end of a draft in certain niche scenarios when you're cleaving. Kalrak has some gear on him. Yeah, he's not the best unit. He's sometimes, you can like rarely pick him at the end of a draft, and Soulburn to reset Sharoon. You can use him for that sometimes, and then overwhelm him with damage. But he's tough to use just because he's really fragile. And, you know, there's so many units that outspeed him now, right? Okay, Sage Ball. So this Sage Ball I don't think is an optimum build, you know, for the way I would play him. I've just kind of run out of gear on this account. So this is how he's geared. Since I honestly didn't really need to pick him very much because I was pre-banning Zeo towards the end. You know, I think the speed and like bulk and proof and stuff is fine. So you can definitely run a ball like this. The ball I would like to run would be like a 300 ER ball on Bastion. And I would do that against Zeo players. However, if you don't have that gear, then, you know, you can run something like this and it's fine. You know, Sage Ball is going to get banned a lot of the time, so you don't necessarily need to have him on that perfect build. But if you do have that 300 ER build, then it makes it really hard for Zeo players to let him through, since they can't Zeo S3 him reliably, and that's, you know, very spooky for them. Here's Inos. She's a very niche pick. You can pick her into Last Rider Crow and then take Opsig in some drafts, and that's pretty much it. Sometimes Hand Guy, you can use her to like aggro into him also, depending on the pre-bans. So yeah, that's Inos. You know, her skill 3 is an attack, so that'll trigger the shields on LRK, and then you can follow up with Opsig, right? And she CR boosts and gives attack buff and stuff like that. So she's helpful for that reason. Okay, DN, didn't really draft her, and this is just kind of random gear. I think this is basically a PvE build for Epic Hell and stuff like that. Strays, so Strays fell off quite a bit at the end of the season because everyone was putting their Arrowell on Holy Sack, and so it was a big gamble if you wanted to take him into Arrowell, and a lot of tank players were playing Arrowell. So Benimaru's Tachi really made this hero go from 0 to hero. He was difficult to draft because you had to, you know, typically take him with an attack buffer, or he wouldn't do enough damage. And so, you know, you would typically draft him slower. And so it was easier to interrupt him, to, you know, ban the attack buffer, and he wouldn't be as effective, etc. But this gives him a free attack buff, and it also gives him an immunity buff, so you don't even need an immunity set on him anymore. You can just run him on crit set, and that lets you run him way faster, which then becomes way scarier for the enemy player. You know, if they have Hand Guy and your Strays is built so quickly, like he's just going to outspeed and delete something. So Strays was a terror there for a few weeks to slow players, I think, because you would pick him and ML Leica at the end of a draft. It was like very classic. You would start with Conquer Lilius, and then you would take Hand Guy Apoc, and then if, you know, they didn't have anything to contest your speed, you would just go Strays Leica, and they would just explode. In a response to that, and because that draft was so effective, everyone started swapping their tanks over to Holy Sack, and it made Strays actually less effective. So you can still take him, but generally you do it in scenarios where you're pretty confident that they're not running Holy Sack. So if they have a unit like Last Rider Crow, or, you know, Ambitious Tywin is their tank, or Crimson Armin instead of Arrowell, then you can run him. Those other knights are likely not going to be on Holy Sack, because Arrowell has that escort buff, so she has the inbuilt Aureus effect. She doesn't need to hold the Aureus artifact. All those other knights do. And if they're not running Aureus, then they're really not effective. So that's Strays. Leica, we already talked about. She's, you know, a huge terror into slow players. Probably one of like the scariest must-ban units for them, I think. So you typically take her at the end of the draft when they can't contest your speed, and they let's get that out of here. They pretty much have to ban her. You can combo her with Lua, and it's like this absurd amount of damage. So Zeo, I was pre-banning him at the end, and yeah, he's incredibly strong. I think the thing that's so crazy about Zeo is you can basically turn any account into a cleave account if it has Zeo on it, because he gets so much free CR, right? Like you build him at this speed and he effectively cuts to like 330 speed or something like that. And now that there's so many bridges like with Jacko and ML Rowana, etc., he just like enables all of that basically. And it doesn't matter if like your intermediate units like, you know, Ran or Para or anyone else are like only 300 or 290 or whatever. You have the Zeo, and people are operating under the assumption that like they're going to have to ban the thing at the end of your draft, so they can't contest you the whole time. And so it just lets pretty much any account get away with cleaving. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I was banning him at the end, was the way my account was set up, I was not equipped well to deal with the Zeo drafts. Because I think one of the effective ways you could deal with that draft was drafting a lot of immunity units and tanking down with like Destina and stuff. But a lot of my units are built really quickly to be aggressive, and they're not on immunity. And so that made it difficult for me to deal with. And so I was like, okay, I just need to ban the Zeo out, and we'll just go from there. So here's Kisei. She's just on filler gear. It's a shame. I like using her. I wish she was meta again. But yeah, this is just basically a PvE Kisei, so you don't need to look at it. Yufine, kind of a niche pick in Zeo drafts. I think ideally you would build her at like 280 speed or something, and this is one of those ways that you can get around the Zeo traps, is you build a Yufine that's so quick that she cuts even if their team gets CR. Okay, Bihu, didn't really pick this unit. I think Bihu's getting buffed though in the next balance patch, so that's exciting. I need to read over that and see. I just saw Bihu's name on it. So this unit, when do we use Bihu? Not very often, but you can sometimes use her against Briarwitch Iceria because of this buff block. So she was okay in some matches against Briarwitch. There's an artifact you can get from a side story that gives her more burns on her skill 1, which is her best in slot. I think it has the name Scroll in it. I forget exactly what it is, but I don't have it on this account, so I'm just using a Summertime Iceria artifact instead. So it's kind of a cheap fill-in. Okay, so AOL. I think it is important to have 2 AOLs, but I probably just don't have the gear to make this one actually scary. You know, I think ideally you'd want a really fast AOL at like 290 or 300 maybe, and then another AOL that was slower. So if, you know, in drafts where you take Mediator Calric or Hand Guy, you want an AOL that's faster usually if you're drafting them together. You know, these days people aren't really drafting in that way, and I think most people don't have the gear to make their AOL that fast because there's so many other speed units you need to gear. So I like essentially never picked this AOL. Let's see, Silverblade Aramentha, never picked her. She's just on filler gear. This is nothing. DJB. DJB is a pretty good unit in certain drafts. He combos well with Para, so you can do that, and then you can use like Fallen Cecilia and Spectre Tenebria as kind of like a core, you know, draft to build, you know, either your account or your strategy around. I think he works well on like a lot of artifacts too. You can use Soul Constellation, and this will help him cut against certain openers. You can use Eternus, same idea with Soul Constellation. You can also use Water's Origin just to make him tankier. Even Guardian Ice Crystal, like there's a lot of options for him. But generally speaking, you want him around 260 speed with some bulk and ER, and that helps him do his job, which is to kind of like, it's either to one, allow you to draft Para because he counters Para, or it's to, you know, kind of cut in between their openers, interrupt their momentum, and then kind of counter aggro them back. Mediator Calric. He definitely fell down a bit this season with the rise of Sharoon, but he's still really good. And you know, you just want him speed tuned to your team so that the DPS going after him can be given attack buff, immunity, and cleansed, and then just a bunch of bulk. I think Warhorn is his best artifact. It's a great support artifact, helps him cycle even more, and he already has crazy cycling, so... okay, so here's the other Sid. This is the Sid that I would pick like 99% of the time, or 90% of the time, or whatever. You basically just want turbo damage on him at about 260 speed. And you can see this is like pretty high gear score stuff, damage wise. So this is a lot of damage. The amount of damage Sid can do with attack buff and soul burn on his skill 3 is, I think, maybe not balanced, because I've seen Sid delete just almost every unit in the game with soul burn attack buff. I've killed Peiras, I've killed Apoc Ravis, I've killed Destinas, that in Wind Rider too. He does a ton of damage, so comboing him with like Ahmed for the boost and the attack buff, and then with Spectre Tenebria for the souls to be able to burn, and you just like delete 2 of the units on the enemy team, right out the gate. So 2 Politises, 1 Politis is for, playing defensively, basically against, things like Ahmed. And you put her on Crown and you build her with, some amount of effectiveness, and the idea here is to cut, basically that strategy that I just described. And it's basically just going to be a gear check between your Politis and their Sid. If their Sid is fast enough, he can cut the Politis with the 2 Ahmed pushes. Politis gets 30%, and then Ahmed, I think Ahmed gives like 45% or something, which then gets cut in half. So you do need a Sid that's like 10 or 20 speed faster than their Politis at least, probably. I haven't done the exact math to see. So, if you can get your Politis about to their Sid speed, then you're still going to cut. And then you want effectiveness on her to, potentially stun the Ahmed if you can, but then just to stun the rest of their team with Crown. Lilius is an interesting unit. She got buffed towards the end of the season, and I think she definitely has like more of a role now. You can use her to, counterpick Lua a bit. Most Luas are not on Song of Stars. If they are, then it doesn't help. Then Lilius doesn't help, because she will activate. Let's see, it's when they use their skill 3, she'll dispel 1 debuff from herself. And Song of Stars puts target and sleep on her, so she'll cleanse the target and then stay asleep, and then she won't activate suppression. And so if you have her on that like Ancient Dragon Legacy Artifact or whatever, like does it? Actually, I'm not sure if that. It's after she uses a non-attack skill, yes. I don't think this activates because she's asleep. Yeah, so it doesn't work. She'll just stay slept, I think, and you won't get that reset. But that's what people do generally, is they use her with that Ancient Dragon Legacy Artifact to counter Lua. You can use her in other ways now because she's been buffed. She'll give herself a CR boost and stuff, and so you can kind of cut in between their momentum. So units like Conquer Lilies and stuff, if you do that, then she will boost up and then can skill 3 and push them back and stuff. It can also force the Conqueror to have to skill 1 that turn if the Conqueror's not on immunity, which can activate your Lionheart Sarmia. So there's a variety of interactions that can happen. Ocean Breeze Luluka, or Lulucar, another popular hero. Ice Crystal is her best in slot, I believe. It's not her own artifact. And this unit is really good. She can really interrupt the momentum of a lot of teams, and the fact that her skill activation thing, the Luluka Special Delivery on her skill 2, dispels buffs. She's actually good against things like Peira, or even sometimes Briar Witch Iceria, things that are in stealth that you need to like pop out and have revealed and stuff. So it gives her a little bit more utility. Her skill 3 puts defense buff and Ice Cream, on your team, and it's just like a ton of defensive, power to help you outlast. The build for her, you want her just around 250 so that she can cut if they use a non-attack skill and interrupt that momentum. Just overall, like a really, really good defensive hero. Landy is a hero who kind of comes and goes in the meta. She's never bad, and some players, have found a way to make her a more consistent part of their draft and their strategy. You'll meet them on the ladder. So right now I'm using a faster Landy, and I think in some scenarios it's good. If you're playing aggressively, having a fast Landy can be really nice. You just want enough speed to kind of cut in between. Let's see, I guess basically to take the turn before a lot of like the slower units, right? Like the slower tanky units would. And then, enough damage to put a lot of pressure on them, and just a touch of bulk so she doesn't get randomly one-shotted by something. is, I think, a good build. I mean, faster would be nicer, but, you know, there's only so much gear to go around. Elena, she kind of actually became really popular on the last day or two because a lot of people were doing these cleaves that involved Summer Break Charlotte, and, you know, that character does an AoE and that can proc Elena to interrupt them, basically. And so having a 250 speed Elena was actually pretty strong. A lot of those cleaves also involved Jacko, and so Elena was deceptively good against that because she didn't give Jacko a good target to kill. Because she was blue, Jacko's at an elemental disadvantage, and it's harder for Jacko to one-shot her. She can also sometimes be a niche pick against Briarwitch Iceria because she, you know, has that mitigation against AoE damage, and she also has the cleanse on her skill 1. If you soul burn it, it'll just dispel everything. And also Doctor's Bag, you know, can help dispel things as well. So, you know, I think Elena is kind of, I think, a deceptively strong hero in the right scenarios. Winter, whoops, is not geared. I think I actually picked her once against KJ with this build. I thought it was funny. I forgot she wasn't, you know, really built, but it still worked out. The only time I'd ever pick AE Winter is against Lua, because Lua can't reset her. So, you know, if Lua uses her skill 3, it's going to proc Winter's thing and basically reset her reset, and put her back, you know, to be able to use her skill 3. So then not only do they need Lua, but then they also need units that Lua can kill. Or, I'm sorry, they need to have Lua, and then they also need to have units on their team that Winter can kill. So Tempest Surin is one of those units. Lua, her skill 3 can come down, and with the fixed damage, plus the damage she does naturally on the skill 3, is typically enough to pop a T-Surin. So that's kind of like a very niche scenario, but she actually works, you know, in that case. So here's my Freak Destina build. So this is a very high gear score Destina who also has a lot of speed. And this build is particularly useful when you're doing that Omid cleave, because you want, you know, you're basically almost using your Destina like an Alots. You're boosting up a hero. And part of what makes this draft so nasty is Omid has a skill, I can show you up here, it's her this silly buff here, this swift attack thing. So at the end of the turn, it increases the combat readiness by 50%, and then it's dispelled. So you boost something up and you give it this buff, and then they take their turn. Like their Sid, if it's a Sid, you want, or you do a ton of damage, or if you boost up Spectre Tenebra, you skill 3 something and do a bunch of damage, and then they go to 50% on the CR bar after that's done. And that's when Destina comes in. So Destina being built quickly, where'd she go? She's up here. Allows you then to skill 2, which does the 50% CR boost. So that's 50% swiftness buff plus the skill 2 from Destina essentially lets you slingshot a unit all the way around to getting another turn, which is kind of funny. So you may wonder, like, why not just use Alots in the draft instead? And the reason why is because Destina provides a ton of cleanse, right? She's a very tanky kind of anchor unit to the draft that Alots, you know, does not provide. She can also revive things, and so it's very difficult for them to pick things that can, you know, kill the units you have and also deal with that fact that Destina, you know, that anchor. And so you see that strategy a lot in these aggressive cleave drafts. It's pairing these very high damage units with anchor units. And it's that combination between the two that makes the draft strong. You saw the same thing happen with Apoc, Ravi, and Ran, right, in previous seasons, where, you know, Apoc, Ravi is that anchor, and there are a lot of units that struggle against Apoc. You know, if you pick squishy units, Apoc can just S3 them and then bring back the that died on their team. You have to have units that can deal a ton of damage to Apoc, and so those things often explode to the cleave units. And so that's kind of the strategy there. You definitely want Ice Crystal on her. It's the best in slot. And yeah, this CR boosting one. So this is not a typical Destina. Most people were running theirs around 200 with like a lot more bulk and some more ER. And that build is really good too, but it's just a, you know, different play style. Operator Sigrid, you basically just want her 240 speed and then some damage. I guess immunity would be ideal, but there's only so much gear to go around. Guiding Light, obviously, on OpSig. So then we have Lethe. Here's another kind of like newer unit this season. Lethe, you know, she wants her own artifact. It gives her more HP. And I think for the Lethe build, you essentially want 240 speed, about 100 ER, and then as close to 27k HP as you can get. And then this artifact will put her to about 30k in game, I think, when it starts. Lethe was okay. You know, there are a lot of people drafting her against Candy, who I pre-banned, so I didn't really use it against that. You could use her against Lionheart Sirmia. That was an option. I saw people doing that, and I think with Lethe, you just kind of had to figure out that you could only take her in like the middle towards the end of the draft, and there couldn't be too much that would interrupt her. So even things like Airwell that would stun her could cause problems because she wouldn't be able to cycle around enough to get her skill 3 stacked up, or her Omen stacked up enough. She basically has to get 3 Omen stacks. So you can get 2 right out the gate with a Soulburn, or you can do 1 and then loop around and then get the 3. But if that gets interrupted and then she gets injured or just blown up or something like that, then it doesn't work. So generally speaking, it was a strategy to use against slower players, that were using like Lionheart, is how I used Lethe. Ida is pretty straightforward. This unit hasn't changed in a long time. You just want her fast enough to, cut enough damage. Here's the slower AOL. This is probably the more typical one. You want her about 100 ER and then some speed and bulk. You could slow her down, if your playstyle is a little slower, and give her even more bulk. I don't think she needs effectiveness necessarily, but it's nice to have. Designer Lilibet, I think you want around like this stat line. You want her fast, so that she can cut. Some people use her even faster and like give her more bulk or something and like less damage as more of a support type thing. I've seen. But yeah, I didn't pick Designer Lilibet too much, but when I did, I wanted her fast to be able to cut. If they had Politis. Here was Summerbreak Charlotte. She's on random gear. I did not draft this unit. Fallen Cecilia, you just really want her on immunity, and yeah, I think she's actually using not the best tank gear. I didn't pick her very often, but yeah, usually 30k, 2k defense is kind of the stat line you're looking for. This is like, it's an okay FCC, not the greatest. Briarwitch Iseria, this build has changed. I used to have a very high damage Briarwitch, a little bit slower. And that build was good, but it's nice having some effectiveness on her. And so you can use like a crit chance neck and then get, use some F on her to allow her to debuff units like Karina, that run, or Senya, that run 100 ER. So it's really nice to have that effectiveness on her. So yeah, that's how I think, is a pretty good way to run her right now. Jacko. This is an all-star for a lot of those really aggressive cleave drafts. Oddly, she ended up on Destruction Set just because I had like this type of piece. I think running her on speed is perfectly fine, right? You just want her like 220, 230, and then high damage. Jacko's Symbol is the best artifact for her, but if you don't have it, you can use other artifacts as well. It doesn't have to be Jacko's Symbol. You can use the Holiday Euphine, or not the Holiday Euphine, just the Euphine artifact. What's it called? Merciless Glutton, I think. Yeah, this one, Merciless Glutton. So it does more damage on a single target attack. You could use Portrait or whatever, just some damage artifact on her. But this is the best one, is the Symbol. Let's see, Pirate Captain Flan. Did draft her a fair bit, against slower players sometimes. You just want her really high effectiveness. More than 200 would be nice, but I like having her with some bulk as well. You don't need a ton of attack on her. I think the bulk and the effectiveness are the most important. I did see some people running like turbo fast Pirate Captain Flans, which was kind of funny, and using her in like a kind of aggressive cleave setup. It felt a little bit like a gotcha, draft where you didn't see it coming, but once you knew that person did that, it was a lot easier to play around. Okay, Shuna, didn't really draft this unit. She didn't really fit my playstyle. You can kind of use her to like interrupt the momentum of aggro drafts with her, let's see, is it her skill 3? Yeah, the skill 3 that puts people to sleep and then puts decreased attack on them. But yeah, she kind of fell off. Sometimes you'd see her against Conqueror. Spectre Tenebria. So here was the Spectre build I was running. She's really fast, you'll notice, and then she still has that like kind of basic 10k 1.1 to 1.2k defense amount of bulk, which is good even for aggressive stennies, because you want to be able to take 1 or 2 hits. You don't want them just to get, you know, one shot right away the second any AoE hits them, and then the rest into damage, and then pen set for aggro. So this is a pretty high gear score stenny. She does really well in an aggressive playstyle with this build. She can, you know, really take a lot of turns with that speed. You definitely notice, like, compared to playing with the slower stenny, how quickly, like, 225 turn cycles. LRK, you just want him fast, I think, bulky, like you can see here, and then immunity set's really nice, and then around 100 ER is what you're shooting for. Not much to say about him. He's a pretty standard tank. He did much better since his buffs. He just cycles around to his skill 3 a lot more quickly, and provides a decent amount of pressure. Rimuru, this here is kind of whatever. You can rarely draft him against certain comps, but he's hard to use now. He just kind of dies. Vildred, this Vildred is kind of on filler gear. He doesn't get used very often. Rarely, you know, as a pick when you're speed racing. Same thing here with Watcher Shuri. You know, these units, they don't need the best gear. You just kind of want to have them as an available option if you do want to speed contest. Milim didn't really pick. I think you can run a faster Milim. That's good too. You don't necessarily need to. You know, she can work okay in like this bruiser build in like the rare setup. Infinite Horizon Acades. Yeah, I didn't pick this unit at all. I think she's pretty bad. You could kind of use her as a cleanser, but you know, I think you'd want way more ER than this, and even then she'll still get debuffed, which is kind of sad and pathetic. Death Dealer Ray really fell off. Why was that? I mean, I guess Landy kind of came out. That was probably the big thing. DDR, you know, you just want fast and like with this amount of bulk, and then some ER to prevent him from getting stunned and stuff, or provoked. And having a touch of effectiveness is nice because he'll give himself an effectiveness buff. Yeah, I think, you know, DDR can still work in some drafts, but there's ways to counter him. Like Injury Ed does work against DDR. Okay, Sharoon. So there's some players that center their whole draft around this unit, I think. You know, the kind of like Maid Carmen type players. And she's pretty obnoxious. If she high rolls, she just takes like infinite turns, it feels like. She also, with her EE here, she's like just constantly getting her skill 3 back up. It's obscene. If she low rolls, then she doesn't feel as good. But having just, yeah, like 210-ish, 220 speed, a bunch of bulk, and some ER, and maybe a touch of effectiveness, I think is a pretty good build for her. I like this build, with the Guardian Ice Crystal and speed set, a lot better. I do see some people running like counter set and Celestine. I think this build is just better. You just get more utility out of her. Good old Carrot, didn't pick her, but I think some players were using her against Candy, but I pre-banned Candy, so didn't use her. Ras, this guy's on PvE gear, so we can ignore him. Roy, did use Roy occasionally as a last pick against certain drafts. Like, he's good into APOC. He's good into like bruisers that hit, you know, like once, right, per turn. They have a hard time finishing him off. So he's really good in those types of things, but obviously not against blue bruisers. It has to be like red or green ones. Astromancer Elena, she's just on filler gear for Arena. So, whoops, can we cycle over here? There we go. So this is the damage Politis. So when you're cleaving or playing aggressively and you just want to do a bunch of damage, you can use this type of build. Having like a little bulk is nice, but you mostly just want like 210-ish speed, 220 speed, and then a bunch of damage. Ambitious Tywin, this guy is nice because you can really screw over some Lulucar drafts with him. You do need a little bit of ER, I think, though, and just because you don't want to get silenced by the Lulucar, and they don't really build effectiveness on them, right? So just having enough ER to resist that is kind of the goal there. And basically what you do is, like, if you take Conquer Lilius first, and then they do Lulucar plus like Lionheart Surmi, for example, you pick AOL and Tywin. And that was a response that got really popular on the ladder. The AOL Tywin combo like triggers a skill null from the Lulu's, special delivery ability, and then it also puts a debuff on someone, which is going to get cleansed off because both AOL and Tywin cleanse a single debuff, but then it activates Tywin's rage ability, which means that his skill 3 is unresistible, which is really funny. So then you just basically defense break their entire team, and you have AOL, so you'll strip away any immunities they have before Tywin goes. So it's a pretty good response. Didn't use Myrsa, obviously, or Dizzy. Surin, I guess she's missing a chest piece, whoopsies. But, she's used for, it honestly could just give her anything here. Give me something with crit damage. Looks great. She, is basically just one of these speed picks that you take when you're speed racing. Oops, and now we're all the way up here. Maid Chloe didn't use. Abigail, sometimes you can use Abigail against Cleave. If they're using a type of draft where they're like trying to one-shot your unit, you can use Abigail to protect against that. But she's pretty niche. She's kind of one of those responsive picks you use at the end. Remnant Violet hasn't really changed. Give him a little bit of bulk and a bunch of damage. Lifesteal set and pen set, and he's good to go. He's an RNG unit. You can sometimes draft him against slower, kind of like low damage drafts because they have a hard time killing him even if they hit him. Alencia, Injury, Bruiser, decent against APOC. She hasn't changed much. Not the best injury gear. Here's Sylvan Sage Vivian. A lot of people ask, I think, what artifact to use for her, probably because she's in this selector now that I think about it. Sylvan Sage is somebody who I think needs a damage artifact. So I'm using Black Hand. It just gives like a ton of stats, right? A bunch of crit chance and crit damage. And she's kind of a slow unit, so the effect of it doesn't really tick down too much. And the reason I like that damage artifact, or just damage artifacts on her in general, is because I feel like if you don't do that, she just doesn't do enough to heal up on lifesteal. And also just to put pressure on the enemy team and threaten them. It takes like multiple abilities to like kill a Spectre Tenebria, and by then they might have like healed it back up or done something. So I think you want about this amount of bulk on her, and then around 200 speed, and then just put the rest in damage. General Purgus, was using him for Zeotrap drafts, but then that kind of fell off and I stopped drafting him. Aiden, used Aiden a fair bit, unfortunately. It's like one of these like curse units that, when she's good, she's good. But she is RNG, so same kind of idea was with Rylet. I build her the same way, around 200 speed, a little bit of bulk, and then the rest into damage, so she can, pop some dark units. Arya, I think, is a decent like niche pick to have against certain drafts. Like, she can be good into Stenny, she can be good into APOC. At the end, like if they don't have a way to dispel, the stealth buffs, or to put up buff block, generally when AOL is pre-banned is when you can use her. Tempest Surin became really popular for a while there because Spectre Tenebria was popular, and T-Surin is a decent answer into her. Always will be, I guess not always, but often will be, depending on the meta. But then I think Spectre fell off when Candy became popular, and so then Tempest Surin fell off. Don't use RB. Celine you can use against some drafts, usually when they have Spectre Tenebria and then they pick like Para or like DJ Bassar, stuff like that. Sometimes Conquer Lilius, because she can threaten the Spectre with the EE that targets the highest attack. Unbound Knight Arrowell, pretty standard Arrowell. You want, I think the speed doesn't matter too much actually with Arrowell, but you just want a ton of bulk, and then you want like 130 ER, and having some effectiveness is nice to be able to take away buffs from like the 100 ER units, because she gives herself an effectiveness buff in her specialty change in here. So, with that buff, plus this, she'll have like 100 effectiveness, so she can strip like Sennias and Karinas and stuff. And, I think Adamant Shield is probably the best in slot for her. Holy Sack is, also good in some scenarios, and like in the meta right now is a good choice. But it's kind of one of those funny things, like you can kind of piggyback off the fact that other people are using Holy Sack and then just not do it yourself. And people will wonder, oh, they might be on Holy Sack, so then they won't draft strays into you. Didn't use Celeste. Here's Edward Elric. I have him on injury. It's like not the greatest injury gear though. So his build's kind of weird. But it's okay. It's like usable. It's a crit damage neck. I think ideally you want crit chance neck on him. And you know, he's Ed. He's like good into debuff comps, but he's a little fragile, so he can be hard to use. But you know, when he's good, he's good. The thought with injury is, you know, sometimes people will use that same anchor strategy with debuff comps where they'll take debuffers and then things like APOC, and so it's hard to pick things that cleanse and also deal with the APOC, and in those scenarios having an injury Ed is really nice because the injury really cripples APOC Robbie. Charlotte, she's on like super filler gear, effectively never drafted her. Maybe into a Senya like once. Not geared. Lionheart Sturmia was a very popular pick this season. You know, they buffed her quite a bit. She's pretty strong now. So good option into Conquer Lilius, anything that dual attacks. Even like they can pick Lulucar and you can sometimes pick Lionheart. Inferno Kawazu, this guy's pretty bad, but you can sometimes like niche pick him to kill a Candy or like an SSV or something of that sort. It has to be a very specific draft scenario though, like he's usually a 4-5 pick, because they can't have things that revive, because once he does his S3, like he's then useless effectively. So you're basically trading him for their unit. They also have to have a way to activate him, so they need an AoE, or you need to have Conquer Lilius to give him Vigor. And if you have all those things, then he can be okay, but usually in those scenarios he gets banned. Yolha, kind of just standard tank, you know, Yolha. You could run her counter set with effectiveness or something, but I don't think it's worth it, so I'm just going to run her speed set. You know, she's a decent tank. She's basically the improved Crow. Take her into, you know, evasion unit so that she can kill them. Destina Yolha is a common response to Aiden. Vivian PvE gear. Here's APOC Robbie. You just want her tanky, you know, speed around 180. Lots of bulk with a preference on HP, and then a good amount of crit damage. You know, the thought process with this build is you're using her as your anchor, so you need the bulk so she can survive, and then you want the crit damage so you can one-shot something and bring that unit back. I don't think you need a ton of speed because she will CR boost herself when she gets hit. Here's the meme Kayron build with Windrider. You just put a lot of damage on him. And then if you kill something, then he gets to hide, right? And that can increase his survivability. So kind of like a similar type of thing with Kisei, right? We're putting Kisei on Windrider, let her be more of a solo carry. So you can sometimes pick him at the end. Dark Corvus, surprisingly decent this season, despite the fact that the Frenzy effect was, you know, to hurt HP scaling bruisers and stuff. But Dark Corvus, there are a few things that I think helped him out. There were a few units that had relatively low hit points that were very prevalent, and one of them was Lionheart Sturmia. Lionheart Sturmia, you know, is a defense scaling hero, so has really high defense, but Dark Corvus doesn't care about that. So even though he wasn't as good as he could have been because of the frenzy thing, he still had enough HP to kill Lionheart Sturmias. So that was like one scenario. Same kind of idea with Lethe, right? You know, other things like Karina, he could sometimes kill her. Candy, he could kill Candy if he lived long enough. So Dark Corvus still worked okay in those scenarios. Against slow players, you could pick him at the end. Durandal is, I think, definitely his best in slot because it just helps him CR boost, so you can kind of ignore his speed and give him the bulk he needs. Here's Shu. Didn't really pick Shu. She fell off quite a bit, but, you know, just kind of standard counter Shu. Crimson Armin didn't pick. Senya, kind of just standard lifesteal Senya. I don't have the greatest lifesteal gear on this account, so it's okay. But, yeah, it's not great. She, you know, when she's good, she's good. I think she's a decent anti-cleave pick. Archdemon Shadow, you know, kind of a hero that you almost never pick. Maybe, like, towards the end of the draft, she could be okay. You know, against things that you can seal, like sometimes she's good against Apoc Ravi. She can be good against like Remnant Violet, things that, you know, when you turn their passive off, they become crippled. I think I drafted her into Candy once, like earlier when I had her not pre-banned. But yeah, Arc Demon, pretty hard to use these days. You know, she's dark and Aiden just kind of stomps on her. Assassin Cartuja, funny unit for anti-cleave. He's pretty good, especially if you can put him on protection set. He just gives evasion to your team. He CR boosts himself up and stuff in your team when he dodges, which is funny. And then you can like defense break their carry if they have one to let you kill it. Requiem Rowana. This is like the worst Requiem Rowana build. I had a build with attack. On attack set that was like much better gear score, but I couldn't get good effectiveness with it. And like honestly, all you really need on this character is effectiveness. You just want really high effectiveness, and then some amount of bulk, I guess, so she doesn't like just instantly die. But yeah, you know, you combo her with Zeo and Para and stuff like that for cleave, right? Here's Karina, pretty standard counter Karina build. I like having high life; it just helps you survive, high HP. And then yeah, just like defense stuff otherwise. Champ Z didn't really draft. This Lone Crescent Bellona is pretty bad. It was a, you know, pick into Candy, I think. But then I just started pre-banning her. You know, Lone Crescent Bellona is nice because she always crits, so she can delete Candy pretty well. But if you pre-ban Candy, you're like almost never picking her if you have my playstyle. Shuri, nothing special, just damage, right, for the speed races. Here's Navy Captain Landy. I think her build's a little different than it was before. There's probably a piece that got swapped around. I think if you're drafting Candy, it's nice to have higher hit points so that you don't get one-shot by Lethe. I think that's around 20,000 HP, maybe 21,000, somewhere in there. And then if you have Aureus, it's like pretty hard for Lethe to actually kill you. Otherwise, you're just going for like kind of around 150 speed, and then about this amount of damage. I think it's like 8.2 MCD or so, and then the rest in the bulk. Obviously didn't draft her. This guy's on filler gear. I never drafted him. I didn't like play cleave that way. Let's see, SSB. Yeah, very niche unit, right? But lifestyle is probably, or lifesteal is probably the best option for her. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, Violet, if you ever draft Violet, I guess. This is like one of those like 1 in like 200 game type units. LQC, again, pretty rare pick, but kind of a standard, just like very slow build, like super high damage. You want her to have enough bulk so she doesn't just die. Didn't draft. Bellion, didn't draft. Yeah, that's... Let's see, Rem. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I don't think I played these other units much at all. Wait, did this cycle? Did I play? Yeah, no, didn't play them. Didn't play. Okay, yeah. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you next time.